The first time I opened the closet, it wasn't on purpose. I was 8, maybe just shy of 9, and we were playing hide and seek after church, just me and the twins from 2 doors down. Their mom was still smoking out front with mine, which meant we had about 15 minutes of unsupervised time before her jaw clicked into place, and she remembered she didn't like people touching her things. I slipped into her room. The door was always open, but that closet, tall, plain, double-doored, felt like the kind of thing you weren't supposed to touch. That made it more interesting. It didn't creak when I opened it. Everything inside was hung neatly and with purpose, uniforms pressed like they'd never been worn, boots lined up heel to toe like soldiers. The air smelled like starch and old metals. I remember reaching out and touching one sleeve light blue with a black patch on the shoulder, and the fabric was cool, like something alive that hadn't been woken up in years. There was a silver bar pinned to the chest. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I'd seen enough war movies to know it wasn't decoration. It was status, power. I imagined her as someone else in that moment. Not my mom who hated loud TVs and burned pancakes every Sunday, but someone who stood straight-backed in deserts and jungles and snowfields, someone who told other people where to go and who to be. When I heard the door slam, I jumped back so hard my heel clipped one of the boots and knocked it sideways. The closet door was halfway open when I turned around. She stood in the doorway, still in her Sunday dress arms, crossed one brow raised like a hammer about to fall. Out, she said, not loud, just final. I left, ran back outside. The twins were already gone. That night there was a knock at the door. I opened it, thinking maybe it was their mom here to collect a purse or return a casserole dish. But instead, there was a man in camouflage, his boots still muddy, his sleeves rolled high. He had a square jaw and something hard in his eyes, like he never forgot what he'd seen. I looked up at him and said, "She's in the kitchen." He didn't move, just looked at me for a moment, long enough for me to wonder if I'd done something wrong. Then he gave me a sharp nod and said it. "General, ma'am." I blinked. He wasn't talking to anyone else. Behind me, my mother stepped into the hallway. "Sergeant Hyde," she said, crisp as breaking glass. He nodded again and stepped in past me like I was a tree in the yard. She walked him toward the kitchen, and as they turned the corner, I heard her voice drop low, muffled by the tile and walls. I didn't follow. Later that night, I crept back to her room and found the closet locked. The brass padlock was the same one she used for the garage tool chest. The next morning, she handed me toast. No butter. She didn't mention the closet. She never did. But that title, General, ma'am, clung to the back of my brain like a burr in a sweater. Like maybe he'd seen something I hadn't, or maybe he hadn't been wrong at all. She could weaponize silence. That's what I remember most from those years. Not the raised voice, she rarely used it. Not spankings or groundings or slaps. No, my mother's cruelty was economical, quiet. She punished with absence, with air. After the closet incident, she didn't mention it, not the uniform, not the sergeant, not the look I must have had on my face when that man called me general, but she didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not one word. Not pass the salt, not brush your teeth. Just the steady rhythm of our routines, me in my chair. Her reading the paper, the sound of a coffee mug meeting ceramic countertop again and again, like a metronome set to dread. She had this way of making silence louder than shouting. She'd look at you like she already knew what you were about to say, and had decided it wasn't worth her breath. I learned to read the temperature in a room by the way she stirred her coffee. When I was 10, I asked about my father. It wasn't a carefully timed question. I blurted it out in the car while we were driving home from school. Did he die? She didn't answer. Was he in the army too? Still nothing. Then as she turned the wheel into our driveway, she said, He never made rank. That was it. 3 words. A sentence that split my world into 2 pieces before and after. What did that mean? Did he fail? Did he run? Was it code for something worse? I asked once more a week later. She was trimming the edges of the backyard with kitchen scissors. Not even proper gardening shears. I stood there in the sunlight and repeated the question. He never made rank, she said again. Same tone, same inflection. And that was when I realized she only gave you the answer once. If you didn't understand it, that was your failure, not hers. I started sneaking into the closet again quietly when she was away on drills or at meetings. By then, I'd figured out how to pop the padlock with a tension wrench and a safety pin. Not because I was especially clever, but because I was motivated. I'd sit cross-legged on her bedroom floor, her jackets and slacks hanging above me like a forest of shoulders. I'd pull down the metals, thick ones heavy, some of them darkened with age and oil, and read the tiny words on their backs. Valor, gallantry, campaign. Words that didn't belong to anything I knew. One metal was shaped like a starburst, another like a cross wrapped in a ribbon. I used to whisper their names aloud just to make them feel less distant. Silver Star, Purple Heart, Meritorious Service. I didn't know what half of them meant, but the names carried weight, like myth. Sometimes I imagined they were mine, that I'd earned them, that the silence in our home wasn't punishment, it was awe, that she looked at me and saw what I could be, not what I already wasn't. But every time I held them, I felt this heaviness behind my sternum. Not guilt, not exactly. More like rehearsal. When she caught me again, because of course she did, she didn't scream. She didn't hit me. She just stood in the doorway, arms folded, and stared until I put everything back. I was 12. She didn't say a word to me for 5 days. On the 6th, she came into my room at dawn, sat on the edge of my bed. I was half awake, crust-eyed, and dry-mouthed, thinking maybe she was going to tell me something human for once. Instead, she looked down at my hand, resting outside the blanket, and said, "Your grip's wrong." I blinked. "What?" She picked up my fingers, rearranged them like I was holding a rifle. Thumb on the side, index straight. No gaps. She let go. Then she stood, adjusted the sleeve of her jacket, and left. That night, I sat in bed wondering if she thought I was soft, if she knew how scared I'd been holding those medals like they'd burned through my palms, if she regretted whatever part of her had let someone like me come into the world. The next morning, her closet was padlocked again. 2 locks this time. The message was clear, not for you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she had forgotten to take the medal from under my pillow. I never gave it back. The fence around the base wasn't made to keep kids out, but it worked anyway. I used to ride my bike up to the edge of it and park in the overgrown grass, pretending I was just passing through. I'd stay for hours sometimes, watching the trucks roll by, catching flashes of uniforms behind smudged windshields, listening for the cadence of drill commands floating over the wire. I was 13 the first time I saw her out there, my mother fully suited, walking beside a group of new recruits. Her gait was unmistakable. Even from 100 yards away, I could tell which one was her. The way she moved, deliberate, like every step was part of a plan. No wasted motion. The men around her, most of them twice her size, moved after she moved like the ground only gave them permission when she pressed it first. I ducked when she turned toward the fence line, hiding behind a rusted electrical box. I don't know why. It felt like I was seeing something sacred or stolen. At home, she was sharp edges and silence. But out there, she was more. She belonged to something that needed her, which made me hate her just a little bit. I asked again later if I could join ROTC. I didn't dress it up this time. No whining, no bargaining. Just a plain statement I want in. She didn't lift her eyes from her paperwork. No. Why not daughters don't drill? Her words felt old, like she was quoting something from memory. I stared at her, waiting for more, for a joke, maybe a wink, anything. Nothing. I should have let it go. Instead, I forged her signature, took her driver's license from her wallet one afternoon, copied it carefully, signed the form in her blocky print, practiced it 20 times on scrap paper first. I turned in the form, got in. It felt like a win. For about 4 days, the letter arrived in the mail, confirmation schedule, expectations. I made the mistake of opening it in the living room. She was walking through with a laundry basket, glanced down at the paper in my hand, and stopped. Her face didn't change. She didn't grab the letter, didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Where'd you get that?" "I signed up," I said. "I'm old enough." "No, I already did." She nodded once, walked into the kitchen. I waited for the explosion, the grounding, the whole list of punishments I knew I'd earned. Nothing. That night, she sat on my bed, not angry, not stern, just quieter than usual. "You think you want what I have," she said, "but you only want the parts they clap for." I didn't say anything. I didn't even move. She reached out and touched my wrist, lightly, like it might shatter. "You'll come to hate the parts of you that win," she said, "and you'll love the parts that leave you alone." Then she stood and left. She didn't revoke the form, didn't stop me from going. But after that, every time I put on the ROTC uniform, it felt like a betrayal. Like I was playing dress-up in a language I didn't understand. The drills were fine. I picked it up fast, too fast. I was better than the others. More precise. I knew how to hold my frame, still how to speak without showing fear. I knew how to hear silence and respond to it. One of the instructors pulled me aside after the first month. "You been trained before?" I shook my head. "You move like someone's already broken you in." I didn't tell him the truth, that I'd been in training since birth. At home, she didn't acknowledge any of it. No comments about my posture, no talk of my schedule. When I won top of the squad, I left the pin on the kitchen counter. She put it in a drawer. Never spoke of it again. I stopped leaving things out after that. Stopped trying to earn her notice. Because deep down, I understood what she'd meant. It wasn't the wins that hollowed you out. It was who you had to be to get them. The power went out that night storm or fuse I don't remember. Just the sudden hush of the fridge, the microwave clock blinking off like a warning. She didn't panic. My mother never panicked. She opened the drawer beside the sink, took out 2 candles, short white utilitarian, and lit them with a match like she did this every week. Maybe she did. I just never noticed. We sat at the kitchen table, the candlelight throwing strange shadows across her face. She looked softer in that light, older maybe, but not weaker. Just removed, like someone looking through a window at their own life. "Want me to get the flashlights?" I asked. "No," she said. "This is enough." I didn't argue. I was 17 and learning finally not to chase every opening like a door that had to be kicked in. She sliced an apple into quarters, passed me a piece. We sat in silence. Then she said, "I knew a girl once. Early tour. She liked to sing. Used to hum when we cleaned our rifles." I waited. She didn't usually offer stories. She wore this ridiculous bracelet my mother went on, turning the apple slice in her hand like it was too sharp to eat. Bright orange, plastic. Said it was from a summer camp. I told her it made her look like a target. Did it? She looked at me for the first time. Yeah. I held my breath. We traded bracelets. As a joke, I gave her mine. She wore it for a week. That was all she got. What happened? My mother didn't answer right away. She placed the apple slice on the napkin in front of her, straightened it like it was a paper document needing alignment. They didn't find much, she said. What they did find still had the bracelet on it, so they gave it to me. She held up her wrist. No bracelet, just a faint line of paler skin where something once lived. Kept it in a drawer after that, she said. Didn't wear it again. I stared at her, not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. I believed every syllable. I felt it curl around the inside of my ribcage like a warning. What was her name? I don't remember, she said too quickly. Then softer. I try not to. The candles burned low. The wind outside pushed against the walls like something trying to get in. After she went to bed, I stayed at the table staring at the cooling wax puddles, the apple skins curling like discarded tongues. I couldn't sleep. Not after that. I tried to picture the girl. Orange bracelet, camp songs, pink skin maybe, hair pulled back in her braid that got dusty every time she crouched. A laugh that didn't belong on the battlefield. I saw her as someone who might have smiled at me, even if my mother didn't. That's when I started collecting stories. Not from my mother, she never offered more, but from others. Base wives, former recruits, an old mechanic who fixed APCs and once told me over a dripping oil pan that my mom used to be the kind of soldier who scared even God. I pieced together fragments, snatches of stories, whispers in between beers, notes in old yearbooks. She'd disarmed a man twice her size once, using only her knee and a mess kit. She once carried a wounded corporal 4 miles with 2 broken toes. She got written up for punching a superior who called her sweetheart. The write-up got lost. The superior got transferred. I tried to form a whole person from those fragments. Myth layered on myth. But none of them matched the woman who made me rewash dishes if the water ran cold. Who told me you'll never win, arguing with a shadow. Who looked out the window like there was always someone watching. At some point, I stopped wanting her approval and started chasing something bigger and understanding. Of her. Of me. Of whatever war had started between us long before I could speak. And late at night, when she was asleep and the walls stopped buzzing with tension, I'd sometimes imagine the bracelet was mine, that she had traded it to me on purpose, that I'd inherited something more than cold shoulders and rigid posture. I started sleeping with my hands curled around my wrist, imagining the shape of it, the weight of that plastic bright orange cutting across the dark. I don't remember what the boy said exactly. I just remember the sound of his voice, lazy and nasal, slick with cruelty he hadn't earned. It was after gym end of sophomore year. He was leaning against the lockers with a pack of other boys, sweat still fresh under his armpits, his eyes on me like I was a joke with legs. Something about my mother. Something about her boots, her voice, her haircut. Your mom a dude. Or just pretending that was it. My fist moved before my thoughts did. Straight punch, center mass. His nose crunched. There was blood before he even hit the floor. I wasn't sorry. I didn't wait for a teacher or a scolding. I walked to the nurse's office myself, sat down, and told her, "You're going to need an ice pack for both of us." She blinked, nodded, called the principal. The meeting was at 3 o'clock. She arrived at 2:57. My mother stepped into that fluorescent-lit office like she'd been summoned to a tribunal. Her boots didn't squeak. Her eyes swept the room once and landed on me, not with surprise, not even anger, just that same unreadable focus, like she was scanning for threats. Principal Hawkins explained everything with his hands clasped too tightly. His voice trembled on the word assault. My mother said nothing. She didn't deny it, he said, trying to find traction. She didn't show remorse. Still nothing. You understand, we may have to suspend her. My mother finally moved, tilting her head just slightly like adjusting a scope. Is he dead? Hawkins blinked. Excuse me. The boy, she said. Is he dead? No. Of course not. Then you should teach him not to talk with his mouth full of teeth. She stood. Meeting over. We walked out in silence. Her hand didn't touch my back. Her shoulders didn't relax. In the car, she didn't turn the ignition right away. You don't get to swing unless you're ready for a war, she said. I was. She looked at me then, really looked, and for just a second, something cracked. Not open, not tender, just a flicker of recognition, like we were the same species for once. That night, I was still angry. Not at her, at everything. The boy, the school, myself. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water and knocked it off the counter by accident. The glass shattered across the floor, slicing into my palm as I tried to catch it. I should have screamed. I didn't. The pain was clean, sharp, real. Blood splattered across the tile. Bright red. Vivid. I watched it drip. She appeared behind me. No footsteps. Just presence. Her eyes dropped to the blood. She didn't gasp or rush forward. She just stared. Then she handed me a mop. Clean it. I did. Later in my room, I wrapped my hand in one of her old bandanas. It smelled like motor oil and vinegar and something sour I couldn't place. I pressed it tight until the bleeding slowed. I stared at the ceiling and thought, so this is the cost. Pain without comfort. Violence without apology. Rage wrapped in discipline. That's when it changed for me. That's when I stopped thinking of her as a wall I had to scale and started seeing her as something else entirely. Not a wall, not a mountain, a border. And if I ever wanted to be whole, I'd have to cross her. But I'd bleed to do it. The lock on my bedroom door clicked for the first time on a Sunday morning. She was in the backyard, trimming the hedges with the same kitchen scissors she'd used for years, snip, snip, snip like a metronome ticking down to some silent detonation. I watched her from the second-floor window. She didn't look up once. That afternoon, I locked my door again. She noticed. Of course she did. At dinner, she didn't say anything about it. She served stew like it was wartime. Forks scraped against ceramic. The silence swelled. She knocked once that evening. Just once. I didn't open it. She never knocked again. By senior year, the house was a grid of cold spaces and assigned silences. Her movements became mechanical, precise. The living room rug had to be recentered every Friday. Trash out by 7 zeros sharp. My laundry was folded and left on the kitchen table in squares tight enough to cut skin. She was slipping back into the uniform. I mean that literally. She started sleeping in her camo again. No boots in bed, but the laces were tied neatly looped and aligned beside the mattress like faithful dogs. She didn't explain it. I didn't ask, but something had shifted. I remember one night I came home late from Lance's house. He was the first boy I let put his hand under my shirt without flinching. I don't know if I liked him or just liked the feeling of someone asking. The screen door creaked when I came in. I thought she was asleep. She wasn't. She stood in the kitchen back to me slicing a pear with that old military knife. Her shoulders didn't move, her fingers steady. You're late, she said. I know. You've been with the boy. His name's Lance. Like the weapon. I stared at her back. He's not dangerous. That's not what that word means. I crossed the kitchen, reached for a piece of pear. She moved the plate away without looking. That was our conversation. The next time Lance came over, she watched him like a threat assessment, eyes trailing him as he sat on the couch, legs jittering, hands fidgeting. He tried to compliment her. "Ma'am, your garden's really disciplined." Her response: "So was my last tour. It still bled." He didn't speak again. When he left, I didn't walk him out. I stood by the front window and watched him literally run down the sidewalk like he'd just survived something. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I didn't. That night, I stood outside her door. Just stood there, breathing. Her light was off, but I knew she was awake. "Why do you always look at people like they're disappointing?" I asked, not sure if she could hear me. I waited. Then through the door, her voice, flat and quiet, because they usually are. "In school, people thought I was cold. Not cruel, just unreachable. Teachers said I had focus. Counselors called me disciplined beyond her years. But at home, none of that mattered. There were nights when I dreamed I was a soldier, not in her image, but in mine. A different kind of soldier. One who didn't need armor to be brave. One who could cry and not feel traitorous. But I always woke up before the dream ended. Always in my bed. Always in that house that smelled like old starch and locked memories. The front line wasn't in a foreign country. It wasn't a battlefield with bombs and sand and flag-draped trucks. It was a hallway, a closed bedroom door, a silence too clean to be accidental. By spring, I'd memorized every creak in the floorboards, every click of the front gate, every way she could move without making noise. I had become a scout in my own home, and every time I passed her in the hall, it felt like two armies brushing shoulders before a war. Neither one of us would start, but both of us would finish. Graduation came with little ceremony. The day was hot, humid, and crowded. My name was called last in the alphabet. I walked the stage with sweat in my armpits and a paper-thin smile that cracked halfway through. I didn't look into the audience. I didn't want to know if she was there. But I felt her absence, like a wound you only notice when it's touched. Later in the gymnasium parking lot, the other parents crowded around their kids like medals being pinned. Photos, hugs, balloons with glitter. I stood alone beside my rusted-out car, holding my diploma like a receipt for something I hadn't ordered. I came home to a cold house. The lights were off. The kitchen was dark, except for the little red light on the coffee maker, blinking like a signal flare. She was in the backyard. I saw her through the window, seated at the edge of the old picnic table, a bottle of something dark in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She didn't smoke. Not that I'd ever seen. But the smoke curled up from her fingers like it had always known the way home. There was a man sitting across from her. I knew him instantly. Sergeant Hyde, older now. The hard lines in his face had settled deeper like roots, but his posture hadn't changed. Back straight, hands loose on the table, waiting. I slid open the door just enough to hear them. "Wasn't supposed to be this long," she was saying. "You made it long," he said. "You think that's the problem? I think the problem's in the kitchen, standing in the doorway." They both turned. He looked at me first. Then he stood, saluted. Same exact words as before, 12 years ago, spoken like a mantra. "General, ma'am." Only this time, I didn't laugh. My mother didn't stand. She didn't move. She just said, "She's not in uniform." Hyde shrugged. "Neither was I the first time someone called me sergeant. Doesn't mean it wasn't true." No one spoke for a while after that. Eventually, I went back inside. That night, I heard her crying. It was faint, muffled behind her bedroom door. Not sobbing, not weeping, Just that kind of cry that sounds like someone trying not to choke. I froze in the hallway, hand on the wall for balance. My knees didn't feel like mine. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I opened the door slowly, like breaching a room. No lights. Just the outline of her on the bed, shoulders trembling. She didn't look up. In her lap was a folded flag. One of the sharp-cornered ones, triangle-shaped. Her fingers were digging into it like it could still bleed. I didn't ask whose it was. I didn't speak at all. I closed the door without her seeing me. In the morning, the house smelled like coffee and dust again. She was already gone. No note, no words. I walked into her room. The flag was gone, but the scent of her perfume still hung in the sheets, like regret. Later that day, I checked the closet. It was unlocked, but empty. No boots, no jackets, no medals, no woman. Just a rod, bare and quiet, like a throat with no voice. She didn't come to the bus. No dramatic airport farewell. No tightly folded note tucked into my duffel. She just left the front door unlocked and the porch light on like I was coming back from a late shift at a job that didn't matter. I'd shaved my hair short the night before. I stood in the bathroom holding the buzzer over the sink, watching thick, uneven curls fall in clumps. No music, no speeches. Just the mechanical drone of the blades and the hiss of my own breath. The duffel bag she gave me was the same one I'd seen her use back in '04 when she came back from overseas. Olive drab canvas. Her name stitched in fraying black thread over the zipper. She didn't say, "Good luck." She didn't say, "Be careful." All she said was, "Don't lose anything that bleeds." Basic hit me like a wall, and I ran into it at full speed. Day 1, they shaved the rest of my hair down to nothing. Day 2, I realized how different I was. Not physically, mentally. I didn't cry when they screamed in my face. I didn't flinch at the language, the heat, the hours. I folded into the schedule like paper into a burn pit. I didn't thrive. I obeyed. But I didn't belong either. The other recruits whispered about home. One cried over a photo of his dog. Another talked about a mom who sent gum in every care package. I didn't bring pictures. I didn't write home. They assumed I was cold. They didn't know the house I came from had no windows. During week 4, I was put in charge of our fire team for a field training exercise. It should have been a small thing. Navigate some terrain, coordinate a drill, keep people moving. But I froze. There was a storm, mud everywhere, boots heavy with water. One of the others, Nolan, lost his map. He looked at me like I was supposed to know where we were. And I did. I had the training. I had the instinct. But something in me seized. All I could hear was her voice. "Don't guess. Guessing gets people killed." So I said nothing. We lost 2 hours. Came in last. Got smoked by the instructors. Push-ups until our wrists gave out. Screamed at until my ears buzzed. That night, while the others slept, I sat in the latrine staring at my own face in the cracked mirror. My jaw was clenched so tight I thought a tooth might crack. I hadn't failed because I didn't know what to do. I'd failed because I could only hear her voice. Not mine. In week 6, I almost washed out. They pulled me aside. Captain Ivers, a compact woman with sand-colored eyes. She said, "You've got all the reflexes and none of the presence." "Why is that?" I didn't answer. She leaned in. "You act like you're waiting for someone else to speak first." I nodded. Didn't know why I did it. Maybe because she wasn't wrong. Later that week, during another drill, someone panicked, Lewis, I think, and shot off a blank into the dirt beside a teammate's boot. Everyone froze. And then I heard my mother's voice again, clear as a rifle shot. Only this time, I used it. "Cease. Fire. Form left. Check your 6. People moved, not because they knew me, but because I said it like it wasn't a question. It worked. Later, one of the instructors muttered, "Hell, who trained you?" I didn't answer. Because I knew what I'd say. A woman with a silent kitchen and a bedroom full of ghosts. That night, I dreamed of home, but not the house, the hallway. She was standing at the end of it just far enough that I couldn't read her expression. The light behind her made a silhouette of her hair, her shoulders the sharp angle of her chin. I tried to walk toward her, but my feet didn't move. My legs were stone. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I woke up in my bunk with my jaw aching again. The barracks were still dark. The others breathing deep and slow. I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the quiet, "I'm not you." And I wasn't sure if it was a lie. We were halfway through a patrol when the boy appeared. Afternoon sun slicing through the haze, our Humvees rolling slow through a village I still couldn't pronounce without spitting dust. We'd been briefed low risk, just show presence. That always meant the opposite. I was second vehicle, window down, helmet tight. Sweat soaked into the pads of my gloves. My rifle lay balanced across my lap like it belonged there. And then, him. A kid. 6, maybe 7. Barefoot, wearing a soccer jersey, 2 sizes too big. He stepped out from an alley with something in his hands held low at his side. Black rigid. Toy. A trigger. I froze. I had time. Not much, but enough. Enough to react. But I didn't. I heard my mother's voice in my head, clipped and metallic. "If it's a choice between being too late and too early, pull." I didn't pull. The convoy slammed brakes, screams, dust everywhere. Someone jumped out, wrestled the kid down. It was plastic, a fake. Cheap, hollow. But in the seconds I'd spent hesitating, Sergeant Dominguez had leaned out of the third vehicle to cover our flank. He didn't see the second kid, the one on the roof. That one had a grenade. We lost Dominguez before anyone could say contact. His body was already cooling when I reached him. There was blood on his dog tags, dirt on his bootlaces, and his hand still clenched around the radio cord, like maybe he'd been trying to call someone, anyone, at the very end. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just wiped my gloves off on my pants, stood, and started shouting orders. Something switched after that. I stopped hesitating. During our next mission, a man ducked out of a stall in a market hands inside his vest. I ordered my team to fan wide. He moved left. I ordered fire. No questions. No pause. He was clean. No explosives. Just scared. But we walked away alive, and they started listening to me. Even the older guys. Even the ones who had names like Ripper and Gunny and 2 tours behind them. I started using her voice when I gave commands. Low, firm, stripped of emotion, like a hammer striking steel. Move. Left. Sweep. Clear. It worked, and I hated how much it worked. My team started calling me Icebox. Not because I was cold, but because I didn't crack. Not under heat. Not under pressure. Not even when we lost Michaels to a misfire. I pulled him out myself. I didn't flinch at the missing leg. I didn't stutter when the medic asked for help holding the artery closed. Back at the tent, they handed me a ration bar and clapped me on the back like I'd just won something. I chewed it with blood still drying in my ears. One night, I sat alone by the comms tent, staring out at the perimeter. I had her bracelet with me, the one from the drawer. The orange was faded now, dusty, cracked in places. I wore it under my glove for the rest of the tour. It left a pale band around my wrist, the way memories leave fingerprints even when they're gone. Later during debrief, a lieutenant said, You give orders like you've been giving them since birth. I smiled, didn't say. Because I have. Didn't say. Because I grew up in a house where silence had rank and every breath had to earn its place. Instead, I nodded. And later, when I sat in my cot, the lights out the bracelet pressing against my skin, I whispered what I hadn't said in weeks. I'm not you. But the way I said it was starting to sound like a prayer. I didn't expect her to be at the airport, but part of me still looked. Every time the automatic doors slid open, I scanned the faces, grizzled men in ball caps, mothers with strollers, lovers with hand-lettered signs. No uniform, no straight-backed woman with a silver bar glinting in the collar. It was fine. I'd told myself it was fine, even as the cold spread down my arms like anesthesia. Outside, it was raining. The kind that slides sideways across your windshield and makes the streetlights look like ghosts in a mirror. I sat in the taxi and let my bags soak through. I didn't tell the driver which address it was until he asked twice. The house looked the same. The steps creaked. The porch light was dead. I used the key still strung to the chain around my neck, hers, same as always. I hadn't taken it off during the tour. I'd worn it through the dust and the heat and the blood tucked under armor cold against my chest. I stepped inside and listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No radio static. No mechanical hum of her percolator. Just the clean, waiting quiet of a place that didn't care if you came back. Then movement. In the kitchen, she stood at the counter slicing apples. That old serrated knife dull as hell. The kind that tore more than it cut. She didn't turn. Good timing, she said. Crispins are in season. I stood in the doorway like a stranger. Boots dripping duffel still on my shoulder. My hands were numb. I was gone 2 years, I said. So was I, in 91. She still hadn't turned around. I dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a thud that seemed too loud in that house. I saw things, I said. You were supposed to. No. She turned finally. Her eyes scanned me, not searching, not surprised. Just cataloging. Boots, wrists, jawline. I see you remembered your gait, she said. And for a second, I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the medals from my pack, dump them on the floor like bones, and scream, I killed. I saved. I froze. I broke. I bled for this country, and I bled for your name, and you stand there talking about my goddamn gait, but I didn't. Because rage doesn't land on her. It slips off like water on a Kevlar vest. That night, I took her old uniform out of the attic. It still fit. I stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, my old bedroom now. Same yellow wallpaper, same cracked baseboard. The metal bar lay against my chest like a brand, and I saw her, not literally, but in the shape of my spine, the set of my mouth, the quiet in my eyes. She opened the door. Didn't knock. She saw me. No shock. No insult. Just a nod. Then she left. The next morning, her closet was empty. The duffel was gone. A note on the kitchen table folded once squared like always. You graduated. That's all it said. I sat in her chair and stared at the grain in the table for almost an hour. She didn't leave a forwarding address. No phone number. No salute. Just silence, perfectly folded. They clapped when they pinned the medal on me. A room full of men and women in dress blues, rows of shining eyes, command staff in stiff chairs. A colonel I'd never met gave a speech filled with words like exemplary conduct and flawless leadership. I stood at attention, chest tight, as if I were waiting to be called out instead of honored. The medal felt heavy when he clipped it on. He smiled at me like we shared something. We didn't. When it was over, they asked if I'd like to say a few words. I stepped up to the podium. The mic crackled. I looked out at the sea of faces, all of them open, expectant. My throat worked, but the words felt borrowed. My mother taught me a lot about service, I said. But more than that, she taught me not to need applause. A few scattered laughs, one hoo-ah. I didn't smile. That night, I went home alone. I didn't go out with my unit. I didn't open the bottle someone gave me, didn't read the card from my commanding officer. I set the medal on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. Eventually, I picked up the phone. I called the only number I had for her. It had been disconnected for almost a year, but I still dialed it from memory. A hollow beep, then voicemail. Her voice recorded from years ago. Still clipped, still clean. You've reached Sergeant Althans. Leave your name. If it's worth my time, I'll call you back. Beep. I spoke, I got promoted. Full commendation. They even gave me one of yours, meritorious service. Everyone clapped. Pause. And all I could think about was how much you would have hated it. I waited. I think you were right, I said, about hating the parts of me that win. I hung up. Didn't cry. Didn't drink. Just stared at the ribbon on the medal and thought about how much it looked like a wound. The base held a retirement ceremony for her a few weeks later. Official. Class A send-off. Slideshow. Speeches. I didn't go. Instead, I went to her house, mine now, and sat in the kitchen. Same spot where she'd once handed me a mop instead of a bandage. I traced the ring on the table where her coffee cup used to rest. I opened her drawer, the one where she kept the bracelet. It wasn't there. Instead, I found a different kind of archive. Folded letters, old duty rosters, a photo of her holding me in a hospital blanket, her face tight with something between pride and panic. I stared at that picture for a long time. She looked 22, maybe younger. Her uniform uncreased, her hands unsure. I put it back. That night, I dreamed of the bracelet girl again. Except this time, she wasn't smiling. She stood in the middle of a road I didn't recognize, one wrist bare, the other covered in blood. She held out her hand to me and said, "Trade." I didn't answer. I woke up sweating, and for the first time in months, I reached for the medal. Not to wear, to hide. I tucked it deep in her drawer under old paperwork beneath a sock that had lost its pair. Because applause doesn't clean you. It only makes the stain look official. The headstone was smaller than I expected. Gray granite, no flowers. Just her name rank and 2 dates, the one she entered the world and the one she left it quietly 4 months ago in her sleep. Stroke, they said. Quick, no pain. She'd been cremated, but I paid extra to have the marker placed in the military cemetery outside of town. It felt right. Not kind, not sentimental, just correct. I hadn't visited until now. The grass around the stone had grown uneven, cut hastily by someone who didn't know how she used to trim the edges with scissors. I crouched beside it and laid her medals out in a line. Not just hers, mine too. One by one, I unpinned them from the velvet case and set them in the dirt. Bronze Star, Army Commendation, Purple Heart. Her silver star last. The ribbon had frayed slightly at the top. I didn't try to fix it. She didn't want a funeral, Sergeant Hyde said from behind me. His voice was deeper now, slower, like every word had to push through sandbags. Didn't want speeches or ceremony. I stood. He limped toward me, cane tapping the earth. His uniform wasn't regulation anymore, faded collar uneven, but he still wore it like it mattered. She wanted to be planted like a tree, he added. Said it was the only thing that didn't feel like theater. We stood there in silence. He looked at the medals, didn't comment. Then he looked at me. General. Ma'am. No smirk, no irony. Just that steady, steel-threaded tone I hadn't heard in years. I held his gaze this time. Didn't flinch. Didn't laugh. You still calling me that? I asked. He shrugged. Some people are born giving orders. Some are born following the wrong ones. The wind picked up, a faint rustling through the trees. A sound like pages turning in a book too long unopened. She ever talk about me? I asked. Once he said you were the only thing she made that didn't need fixing. I almost laughed. Almost. She cried, I said. Once. Over a flag. He nodded. The folded ones get the loudest ghosts. We stood there a while longer. He didn't try to tell me stories. He didn't offer memories. Just stood. That felt like the closest anyone ever came to mourning her properly. Before he left, he put his hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, not just in weight, but in everything that lived behind it. Don't salute her, he said. Not today. Why not? Because she wouldn't salute back. He limped off after that, disappearing down the gravel path, one boot dragging slightly. I stayed, watched the sun dip low behind the marker. When it was almost dark, I stood, brushed dirt from my pants, and looked at the medals one last time. Then I walked away. No salute, no tears, no backward glance, because that was the way she trained me. Because that was the way she loved me. The duffel bag lives in my attic now. I packed the uniform away last winter, folded it the way she taught me. Tight corners, seams, aligned medals in a velvet pouch. The boots went in last soles together, laces double knotted like they might walk without me if I left them loose. I don't open it, not anymore. Sometimes when it rains, I swear I can smell the starch through the ceiling. I still wake up at 0500, can't help it. Some reflexes settle into your spine and refuse to leave like shrapnel that healed around the bone. I get up, stretch, and make coffee in silence. No cadence, no orders, no steel-toed purpose. Just quiet. I teach now military history at the community college, 2 sections a semester. Clean blackboards, tired students, half-hearted essays about the morality of warfare. I don't grade hard, but I don't make it easy either. They call me Professor A. I don't correct them. They ask about combat sometimes. The eager ones, the ones with shaved heads and sharp backs and the wrong kind of curiosity. I tell them about formations, tactical errors, terrain advantages, how to read a map under stress. I tell them what's useful, but I never tell them about the boy in the jersey or the bracelet I kept under my glove. I don't tell them about the funeral that never happened, or the silence that followed me longer than any enemy. Some things don't get turned into curriculum. I keep the bracelet on my desk. Orange plastic. Faded, cracked, useless. A student once asked if it was mine. No, I said. Not really. Most days I forget it's there. Most days I don't. I don't wear uniforms anymore. My wardrobe's all cotton and gray soft clothes that don't hold shape. No more boots, just sneakers, flats. My step is lighter now. I try to remember how to walk without stomping. But sometimes when I catch my reflection in the office window, or hear the way I correct someone's tone, I still hear her. In my clipped phrasing, in the way I stack papers in straight piles, in the way I nod once instead of smiling. I tell myself I'm not her. I say it when I fold laundry, when I dismiss a student too quickly, when I grip the steering wheel too tightly during traffic. I say it with my lips pressed shut, I'm not her. But I don't believe it every day. And maybe that's okay. Because I'm also not a soldier anymore. The war ended even if I never heard the whistle. No one clapped when I packed the uniform. No one saluted when I retired my voice. But that was the gift, wasn't it? No applause. No permission. Just me. Standing in a classroom with chalk on my hands and students who think war is something that happens elsewhere. Let them think that. Let them stay soft a little longer. When they say thank you, I nod. Not out of habit, not out of rank, but because I understand what it costs to mean it. I'm 36 now, and I don't salute ghosts anymore.